They thought I wouldn't notice. The black SUV parked 2 houses down, the guy walking his dog at 3 a.m. Every single night, the new neighbor who waved a little too perfectly. To them, I was just another reclusive homeowner, another guy with closed blinds and late-night routines. But what they didn't know, I'd seen this play before, just not from a homeowners association, and they picked the wrong man to surveil. Before I dive in, let me ask, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. We're tracking HOA chaos like this from coast to coast. And who knows? Your town could be next. Let's rewind to the moment it started. It wasn't loud. No banging on the door. No letters slipped under the mat. It started with a silence I didn't trust. 2 weeks ago, the HOA Facebook page, normally a non-stop stream of noise, went dark. No complaints, no BBQ invites, no "can we talk about the paint on lot 47", just quiet, that kind of quiet. It means they're talking somewhere else, offline, privately, about something they don't want tracked. I've spent 17 years inside NSA systems analyzing digital footprints. This wasn't a lull in activity. This was a shift in platform. They moved, so I started watching, noticing patterns. A neighbor who always took their trash out suddenly stopped. A landscaper I'd seen for 6 years was replaced by 2 guys who wore matching black shirts with no branding. And the cameras, 3 new doorbell cams installed within 2 days, all pointed slightly off-angle as if trying to capture more than just porches. This wasn't HOA enforcement. This was collection. They were building a picture of me. Now here's the part that should have scared them. I used to track foreign operatives for a living, Russian deep-cover plants, Chinese cyberfield agents, American turncoats laundering digital noise through family Facebook pages. And the first rule of spying: never let your target realize they're being watched. They broke that rule in 3 days flat. It all clicked the night I walked out onto my back patio at 2:47 a.m. and heard a soft chirp. To anyone else, it'd sound like a cricket, but to me, it was a surveillance beacon, a short-range signal ping, used to locate a dropped asset in the field, buried beneath the mulch near my shed. I didn't dig it up right away. I walked calmly back inside, turned off all lights, sat down at my kitchen island and opened a secure terminal I hadn't touched in months. It's an air-gap system, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no chance of outside interference. I activated the spectrum scanner, and sure enough, signal source found range, 22.7 meters frequency, non-commercial pattern, rotational 60-second ping. This wasn't retail tech. It was repurposed military frequency hopping gear, expensive, niche, and not the kind of thing Karen down the street picks up from Best Buy, so I went dark. Digitally, I disappeared. Killed my IP logs, wiped my browsing history, activated 3 decoy devices to simulate daily traffic physically. I kept my routine clean: grocery runs, trash days, a few polite nods at the mailbox. But inside, I was mapping out a counter-surveillance loop, not just to protect myself, to trace back whoever thought this was smart. 3 days in, I confirmed visual tailing. There were 4 of them, 2 rotating vehicles, 1 pedestrian who used a fake limp for sympathy, and a drone, civilian grade, modified with a silent rotor rig. They were trying to build a file, habits, entry points, maybe even vulnerabilities. But here's what they didn't know. I wanted them to follow me, because while they watched me, I watched them watching me. I ran the plates, all leased through shell companies tied to a private entity called Pinewood Compliance Services. That's not an HOA name. That's a front. I dug deeper, and sure enough, Pinewood had only one known client: Silver Pines Ridge Neighborhood Association, my HOA. So I walked into the clubhouse during their open office hours, quiet afternoon, nobody else around, and there she was, Paula Sims, HOA vice chair, sweater over the shoulders, drink in hand, smile too tight. "Mr. Graves," she said, "finally decided to join us." I leaned against the door frame. "Just wanted to ask a few questions." "Of course. Did you authorize outside surveillance on my property?" Her eyes didn't move, but her fingers tightened around her coffee mug. "Excuse me, Pinewood Compliance. That name ring a bell?" Now she blinked. "Only once. I don't know what you're talking about." That's when I smiled, because now I knew they weren't just spying on me. They were trying to build a trap, set the stage, push me into a confrontation, use non-compliance as a weapon to get me removed from the neighborhood altogether. But they had no idea who they were trying to outmaneuver. I didn't fight loud. I fought invisible. That night, I triggered a fake signal drop near the rear of my property, a dead zone I'd left open on purpose. And sure enough, 2 hours later, one of their fake agents came creeping through with a signal reader. Except this time, he found a small black box blinking red, not a tracker, a recorder. It caught his face, his voice, and the words, "Target unaware," collecting final range signature. Wrong, buddy. Very aware. I pulled the footage. Face recognition nailed him to a contractor formerly tied to a failed municipal surveillance trial in Utah, blacklisted for abuse of power. And now he was working for my HOA. The game had changed. They wanted me gone, fine. But I wasn't going quietly. I was going to turn the entire HOA board into a national case study in private overreach. And what happened next even I didn't anticipate. Because when I followed the money behind Pinewood, I found out a shocking secret. Well, before we see what it was, if you're enjoying this story and love such dramas, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber keeps me motivated to dig deeper, uncover more wild stories, and bring you even crazier content. Your support means everything. It's what keeps this channel going strong. And trust me, there's plenty more chaos coming your way. Back to the story. The secret was something that made me stop cold. A direct payment from a federal grant tied to residential behavior mapping initiatives. They weren't just spying, they were testing something, and I had just become their biggest problem. I'd seen false surveillance networks before, but this was different. This wasn't a foreign actor, wasn't a black hat contractor selling intel to the highest bidder. This was my neighborhood HOA, laundering private paranoia through a shell company funded by a federal behavioral mapping grant, and somehow it was all being disguised as community safety. I ran the grant ID. It was real. Tied to a quietly passed pilot program called Residential Harmony Analysis, buried deep inside a Department of Housing and Urban Development initiative. The official language. Designed to enhance suburban coordination and stability through passive observation of resident behavior in structured communities. But the attached directive said it all. Phase 1 objectives. A. Identify non-conforming behavioral nodes. B. Monitor for deviation from environmental norms. C. Document escalation paths for preemptive policy enforcement. They were building risk profiles based on how people lived, what time they took out trash, how often they spoke to neighbors, what kind of packages showed up on their porch. They weren't protecting the community, they were mapping it. And I had just tripped every trigger in their system. I called in a favor, an old NSA buddy who now worked freelance in cyber audit. He owed me after I covered for a mistake he made on a drone misfire in Moldova. Need access to local HOA board communications, I said. You serious? They're running a federal test through a third-party front. I'm in the middle of it. Give me 12 hours. He got it in 6. Their private emails were a goldmine. Encrypted Slack channels, meeting recordings. One titled, "Handling Graves, My Last Name." Here's what they wrote. His silence is suspicious. No HOA participation equals long-term disruption risk. Could indicate hostile domestic behavior. Recommend final phase test under grant line 47. They didn't see me as a resident. They saw me as a problem to model. One board member even joked, if he snaps, we'll be the case study of the year. They were hoping I'd break, not stop me, document me. That's when I understood what Parallax was trying to do in the last Op2, and it made me sick. These programs don't need arrests or violence. They just need to create fear, tension, uncertainty. They want neighbors to turn into informants, to believe surveillance is protection. Because when people accept being watched, you don't need fences anymore. They cage themselves. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not here. Not in the town I moved to so I could finally have peace. So I did what I'd always done in operations. I flipped the script. I became the watcher again. First, I built a pressure loop. I triggered a false flag in their surveillance system by creating what looked like escalating behavior. Lights off for 2 days, unusual heat signature in the backyard, one fake outbound email seeded into their decoy mailnet to them. It looked like I was preparing for something. They bit hard. The HOA board, especially Paula, pushed the panic button. In one leaked message she wrote, "Pinewood confirmed target behavior has reached escalation stage." They'll proceed with Phase 3 tonight. Phase 3? I had no idea what that meant, but I was ready, at exactly 2:17 a.m. 3 unmarked vehicles approached from different angles, not police, not city. Private transport vans, no plates, tinted windows. They parked without lights. One figure stepped out, carrying what looked like a flash suppressor camera and a case I recognized. It was an EMF interference rig, used to disable short-range comms and Wi-Fi in tight zones. They were planning to jam my signal, then breach. But I wasn't in the house. I was on the roof of the neighbor's shed, across the street, completely hidden by a thermal deflecting blanket and a passive lens camera, watching. Recording when the vans moved in, I triggered the trap. A burst signal was sent to Cam, encrypted, time-stamped, with live visual feed. He had already looped in local law enforcement and a federal liaison. Within 2 minutes, sirens lit up the edge of the cul-de-sac, marked cruisers, federal vehicles, flashlights on faces. It was over before it began. The fake agents were taken into custody. 2 ran. 1 fell. Broke his ankle trying to jump a fence. The other slipped behind a bush and got hit with a stun round. They all had IDs, but none of them were real. All tied to Pinewood. All cross-referenced with subcontractor logs from residential harmony analysis. They weren't security. They weren't cops. They were behavioral field testers, and I had them all on tape. The HOA board gone by morning. Paula vanished, resigned via mass email citing health issues. Others deleted their social profiles. The clubhouse closed pending renovation. But it wasn't over, not even close. Because Cam called me that night. They found a secondary list, he said. Another target roster. Worse. Define worse. It wasn't just about watching you, he paused. It was about seeing what you would do if they pushed far enough. They wanted me to fight back. They were hoping you'd lash out violently. That would have justified full surveillance expansion. You were the edge case, the wild card. And now you didn't break, he said. You flipped it. That makes you dangerous to their model. I hung up and stared at the street, empty now, silent. But I knew better. They weren't done. They were just recalculating. I opened my secure terminal one last time that night, logged into an encrypted public platform I hadn't used since I was in the agency, and I typed a single message to an old unit thread. Behavioral mapping test confirmed. Target suppressed. Model failed, but they're going to try again. I'm staying in the open. Let's make sure they don't get it right the next time. Because this was never about one HOA. It was about how far people will let themselves be watched before they watch back. The next morning, I received a burner email from an unknown address. Subject line. You weren't the only one. It had an attachment, a spreadsheet. No names, just addresses. Locations across the country. A suburb in Florida, a mountain town in Colorado, a gated community in Texas, a retirement village in Ohio, my own street, listed as Node 6. I opened the file's metadata, created 6 months ago, modified 2 days before the vans showed up. It wasn't a surveillance list, it was a testing blueprint. Each location tagged with labels: control compliant, silent reactive, disruptive watch, non-compliant edge, my home, marked as non-compliant edge. Active escalation required. They'd flagged me weeks ago. What happened wasn't spontaneous, it was scheduled. I called Cam. This isn't just a few rogue boards, this is systemized, he agreed. This is the prototype for something bigger, he said. Not just about HOA control. They're testing national application models, quiet ones. He paused. We found internal memos referencing potential urban replication. That means taking the model beyond suburbs, apartment complexes, dorms, assisted living centers. So they're moving in quietly, I said. He nodded. No one notices surveillance when it hides behind a community safety badge. I started calling names I hadn't spoken to in years. NSA contacts, retired Homeland liaisons, even one former DARPA engineer. They all confirmed the same disturbing thing. There are multiple experiments running right now, all framed as civil stabilization efforts. One source said it best. We spent decades overseas trying to influence behavior at a population level. Now they're testing how to do it at home without calling it that. I built a war board in my garage. Pins, strings, maps. Every location from the spreadsheet, linked to a registered HOA, a third-party compliance contractor, and a private funding source funneled through a shell nonprofit. The nonprofit was called the Neighborhood Order Foundation. Sounded harmless. Sounded like something your grandma would donate to. But the board of directors, all former government consultants with backgrounds in behavioral science, urban surveillance, and mass data collection. It was a shadow program. A domestic test in plain sight, built through the least suspect system imaginable, homeowners associations. Because no one expects the HOA to be watching you until it's too late. I went back into the field, traveled to one of the towns on the list, Marion Hollow, Ohio, on the surface. Normal, but I saw it instantly, signs that said Community Pride Zone active monitoring patrols with reflective vests and tablet scanners residents, who never looked me in the eye. I posed as a consultant looking to move in. The board was polite, too polite. When I asked about their monitoring partnerships, they brushed it off. Just standard HOA compliance, they said. But the moment I left the clubhouse, I was followed. A teenager with a GoPro on his chest trailed me for 5 blocks. I cornered him gently behind a gas station. "You're not in trouble," I said. "Just tell me what they told you to do." He blinked twice, hesitated. "They said to keep an eye out for visitors, log anything weird, movement, body language, stuff like that. They give you a script." "Yeah, you still have it," he nodded. "Send it to me via airdrop." The file was titled, Youth Observation Guidelines Tier 1 Compliance. Inside, behavior cue tables, emotional deviation checklists, reporting templates based on perceived instability. They had weaponized neighborhood kids as informants. Not just to watch strangers, to watch each other. I left that town that night, but I didn't stop thinking about that kid, because once you teach someone that surveillance equals safety, you create a culture that forgets how to breathe unless it's being watched, and that's not protection. That's programming. I compiled everything. The emails, the field tests, the blueprint, the nonprofit links, the HOA compliance pathways. I sent it to 3 contacts. Cam, a former federal oversight auditor who now runs an Ethics Watch NGO, and a journalist I trusted with my life. The kind who doesn't blink when the truth gets ugly. They didn't ask questions. They just said, "This will burn everything." But I had one more mission. I needed to find the architect, because every operation has one, and my money. It was on a man named Dr. Elias Mordane, a behavioral scientist, former DARPA strategist, disappeared from public view 5 years ago after a project called Urban Sync was shut down for ethical violations. Guess who just happened to be listed as a founding member of the Neighborhood Order Foundation? I found him, living under a new name, new face. Still working quietly in the private sector, but not quietly enough, because he was scheduled to speak at a closed-door civic compliance summit in 3 days, hosted by a security firm out of D.C. Cam got me in, fake credentials, guest pass, cover name, Thomas Gray. And when I stepped into that room, I saw them all, the faces behind the HOA surveillance pilot, the minds who believed passive submission could be manufactured through fear disguised as neighborly order. They spoke about adaptive pressure models like they were discussing weather patterns. They joked about how easy it was to get boards to overreach. And then Mordane took the stage. He said, "The future of peace isn't found in silence. It's found in predictable submission." That's when I knew. He didn't see us as citizens. He saw us as variables, and me. I was going to be the outlier that destroyed his entire experiment. He stood there like a preacher in a lab coat. Elias Mordane, the man who turned neighborly paranoia into federal data, the architect of fear dressed up as protection. Behind him, a digital display cycled through images. A suburban street labeled Alpha Node HOA patrols in reflective gear graphs marked compliance uptake, and dissent mitigation. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was pitching. I scanned the room. About 40 attendees, mostly consultants, behavioral analysts, a few tech contractors in corporate polos. Most of them nodded along as Mordane spoke. We've seen a 38% decrease in public dispute reports within pilot zones. Residents are self-policing. Emotional outbursts are down. Civility is increasing. He paused for dramatic effect. And we achieved this without a single badge, without a single uniformed officer. That's the future. Peace through passive control. They clapped. I didn't. I was too busy recording. My cover ID, Thomas Gray, checked out. Cam made sure of it, but I knew it wouldn't last long once this footage hit the surface. I needed to make this count, so I waited until the cue and a session. Mordane opened the floor. A microphone floated toward me. My heart didn't race. This wasn't fear. This was muscle memory. I stood. What do you do when one of your nodes doesn't comply? What happens when your subjects resist behavioral pressure? He smirked. Resistance is part of the process. Every system has anomalies. That's how we test durability. I nodded slowly, then asked, and what if the anomaly fights back? Not with violence, but with exposure. Now the room was quiet. Mordain tilted his head. Then we learn and we adapt. He was calm. But his fingers twitched at the podium. He recognized me, not my face, my language. I was speaking in their code. I walked out before they could trace the ID, but I left a gift. An encrypted flash drive slid under a nearby tech rep's laptop. Inside, every leaked HOA surveillance file, every incident, every node, every child informant log, a kill switch. By the time I reached my safe house that night, the footage had already made it to my contact at the Journal, and the headline, "The Man Who Watched You from Your HOA." How one scientist turned suburbs into surveillance lab. It went live at 5:17 a.m. By 5:43, it was trending. News anchors tried to explain it gently. Digital compliance zones, neighborhood data trials, behavioral mapping partnerships. But the public wasn't buying it. They saw the footage, Mordain's words, the graphs, the kids, the doorbell cam footage of fake agents in HOA gear. And people weren't just outraged, they were afraid. Because if this could happen in a quiet cul-de-sac, it could happen anywhere. Cam called. You've got them rattled. Good. But they're not folding. What are they doing? Trying to reframe it. They're saying you're a discredited agent with a vendetta. Let them. Why? Because that means they're out of tools. I went live again that evening, face on camera, voice steady. I didn't speak up because I wanted attention. I spoke up because I saw something most people missed. I spent years watching foreign actors manipulate civilians through subtle influence. I never thought I'd see the same tactics used by our own neighborhoods. This wasn't safety. It was soft control, and they almost got away with it. They made a mistake. They tried it on someone who sees surveillance before it breathes. The floodgates opened. More neighborhoods came forward. An HOA in Nevada had installed compliance microphones inside smart light poles. A community in Arizona had started ranking residents' participation index, tied to clubhouse access. A family in Oregon found a hidden cam planted in a backyard tree after a landscaping company mistakenly trimmed the wrong branch, all tied back to shell companies. All roads leading to the Neighborhood Order Foundation. But Mordain, he didn't run, he doubled down. He released a statement. We reject the notion that passive observation is unethical. In a world of rising instability, we must innovate new ways to preserve peace. I knew that tone. It wasn't desperation, it was confidence, because behind those words was the unspoken message, you can't stop us. So I made one last move. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in 8 years. Her name was Eileen. She was once Mordain's research partner until she bailed mid-program and vanished. I knew she was still alive. NSA doesn't lose people that easily. When she answered, there was no small talk. Is it true? She asked. Yes. You were the one who dropped the Node 6 firewall. I was the subject. Silence. Then, I warned him years ago. He wasn't modeling behavior, he was manufacturing it. Can you help me take him down? No, pause. But I can make sure no one funds him again. The next day, 3 major backers of the Neighborhood Order Foundation pulled their donations. Their public statement, we were misled about the scope of the project. We do not support psychological manipulation under the guise of safety. Mordain went dark. His summit pulled its footage. The foundation's site redirected to a generic 404 page, and just like that, the structure began to collapse. But I knew it wasn't over, not really, because this program was never about Elias Mordain. It was about what we let fear become when it's dressed up as safety. HOAs were just the beta test, but the next version would come without logos, without patrols, without obvious surveillance. It would be invisible, accepted, welcomed, unless someone like me or you kept watching. You'd think when the story broke wide, when the donors pulled out and the program started bleeding in public, that would be the end. But people like Mordain don't go down with the ship. They torch the evidence, rebrand the hull, and try to sail it again under a new flag. Which meant one thing: I wasn't done yet. The Neighborhood Order Foundation's website went offline, but not their network. I watched it mutate in real time. A new group surfaced within a week, calling itself Civic Future Solutions. Same founders, different names. Same objectives, cleaner language. We believe in proactive community design through data-informed decision-making. Translation: we're still watching you, just without telling you this time. They dropped the words compliance, observation, and behavior from their materials. Now it was all about harmony, resilience, and adaptive architecture. They'd learned, they were evolving, but so was I, because what they didn't know, I still had one card left. The footage I'd collected, the meetings, the test runs, the child informant script, that was just phase 1. Phase 2 was the internal comms leak. Eileen came through harder than I could have imagined. She still had her access token from the early pilot days, long dormant, buried deep in their back-end node servers. And when she logged in, she found it: the integration plan. A full white paper detailing how Civic Future Solutions would shift from HOA-based enforcement to landlord property packages, smart home provider partnerships, and even public-private zoning agreements. They were moving beyond HOAs. They wanted cities. Cam's voice was tight when I called him. They're preparing for phase 2. Yeah, can you stall it? Not this time. Why not? Because they already have buy-in, Silicon Valley municipal contracts. It's locked. I exhaled. So what's left? You, he said. You're the anomaly they still can't predict. You wrecked phase 1. They're going to try to shut you down before you can stop phase 2. And just like that it began. At 4:22 a.m., the power at my house cut. No storm. No transformer issue, just darkness. I flicked my wrist, backup system kicked in, battery lights, emergency relay, no panic. Until I checked the cameras, offline, all 6 of them. Every one of my private feeds had been breached, remotely disabled, not destroyed, wiped. This wasn't a local hack, it was inside infrastructure. I grabbed my offline tablet and ran a diagnostic sweep. Found the insertion point within 3 minutes, subroutine 6B. Silence protocol. It had federal-level encryption, built to hide, but not from me. I cracked it in 12 minutes, and what I found wasn't just a remote kill code. It was a footprint, tied to a server out of Virginia, under a company called Echelon Gridworks, a known data contractor for domestic security audits. I'd seen them before. They built behavioral databases for FEMA. Now, they were subcontracted under Civic Future Solutions. I had them, so I did what I do best. Counterinfiltration. I wrote a false script into the subroutine, one that mimicked total surveillance loss. Meanwhile, I activated a separate string, one they couldn't see, routing my entire live home feed through a shadow protocol linked to Cam's secure node. To Civic Future, I was blind. To me, they were finally exposed. At 5:01 a.m., 2 black SUVs parked at the end of my street. They didn't approach right away. They watched, thermal scopes aimed, scanning for signs of movement. I gave them nothing. Then, 5:19 a.m., 2 figures broke from the SUV and approached the house. Not HOA goons this time, not kids with walkies. These were real, military posture, silent footwork, tight formation, but not federal, private contractors. Elite. They breached, front lock bypassed with a pulse key, door opened. They entered quiet, cleared left, cleared right, but they never looked up. That's where I was, in the ceiling crawlspace already behind them, silent as breath, watching, waiting, recording. When they reached the hallway, I triggered the burst light, blinding flash, sonic pulse. They dropped, hands up, momentarily disoriented. That's when I spoke. You're trespassing under false contract authority. The taller one blinked. You're Graves, NSA Counterintelligence. You just triggered 5 layers of felony surveillance abuse. I tossed them a burner phone already connected to Cam. Talk to legal. Don't run. It gets worse if you run. They froze. Because they weren't hired to kill, they were hired to intimidate. But it didn't work. Because they didn't know what I knew, and they weren't ready for what came next. The leak went live that afternoon. Eileen dropped the integration plan through a whistleblower channel. Major news outlets picked it up. 3 cities suspended smart zoning pilot contracts. 2 tech firms dropped their partnerships with Civic Future. And by midnight, Civic Future Solutions collapsed. But I wasn't celebrating, because Mordain, he still hadn't resurfaced. No statement, no denial, no retreat. He just vanished, which meant he was planning something else, a pivot, a final adaptation, and I had to be ready. Because you can dismantle a structure, but if you don't find the architect, they'll just build again. A sniper doesn't pull the trigger when they're angry, they wait, they breathe, and they make the shot when it matters most. I hadn't fired a real bullet since I left NSA field duty. But every move I'd made in the past 2 weeks was a shot. And now the last one was locked after Civic Future Solutions crumbled. Silence followed. A deep one, no threats, no online chatter, no disinfo smears, just quiet, that kind of quiet it means recalibration. They weren't retreating, they were hiding. Cam called from a secure line. We've swept all known infrastructure. The nodes are down, the shell companies are folding, but Mordane's signal went cold. He's the last one. Yeah, and he's watching. Let him, I said. I didn't go into hiding. I went louder, spoke on 2 national podcasts, released a full declassified timeline of what happened to me, from the first letter from my HOA to the final breach in my house. People listened. Some were shocked, some angry, some in denial. But they were listening. That's all I needed. Then it happened. 3:36 a.m. an email. No subject, no sender, just a single phrase, meet me where it started. Attached was a location pin. The Silver Pines Ridge Clubhouse. My old HOA, the first battlefield. I arrived just after sunrise. Empty, dusty. Half the windows boarded up since the surveillance scandal hit national news. But inside, a single folding chair sat in the middle of the main hall, and on that chair, a box. Inside the box, a burner phone already ringing. I answered. Graves, Mordane said, voice calm, flat. I didn't expect you to be sloppy. You're not worth stealth anymore, he chuckled. You won. You stopped the rollout, the funding's gone, temporarily. He didn't deny it. That's the problem with truth, he said. It wins in the short term, but fear always comes back. Not this time. Why not? Because now we know what it looks like. Silence. Then, you never understood what this was really about. Control? No, he said. Comfort. People don't want freedom, they want certainty, and we gave it to them. By turning them into lab rats. By giving them order in a world addicted to noise. I paused. Funny. You call that comfort, I call it conditioning. He didn't argue, he didn't plead, he just sighed. You're going to spend the rest of your life chasing shadows. Maybe, I said. But at least I'll know which way the rifle's pointed. Click, he hung up. 3 minutes later the phone burned itself. A chemical igniter built into the SIM compartment, sophisticated, NSA level, probably his way of saying, you're not the only one who used to wear the badge. I stepped outside, stared down the quiet suburban street where it all started, same houses, same hedges, same for sale signs that had been up since the scandal broke. Except now, people weren't afraid of weird neighbors, they were afraid of what they didn't ask about. In the weeks that followed, fallout spread fast. A congressional hearing was launched into private surveillance through domestic housing organizations. The term compliance score was officially flagged by 2 federal agencies, and HOA boards across the country rewrote their charters to ban. Third-party monitoring agreements. Was the war over? No, but the illusion was shattered, and that was enough for now. Cam offered me a job, counter-surveillance training for federal oversight teams. I turned it down, not because I didn't want to help, because I already was, these days. I teach quietly, work one-on-one with communities, show them how to see what's hidden in plain sight, how to ask the right questions, how to know when protection becomes pretense. One time, a young woman in one of my workshops raised her hand and asked, how do we know someone's watching us? I smiled. You don't, I said, but if you feel like they are, you're probably right. Before I left, I gave her a small card. On it just 4 words, don't blink too long. Because the truth is, they will come back under new names, new tech, new promises. But now, we've seen them once, and a sniper who sees a target never forgets the silhouette.